Hi everybody, welcome to Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you for joining us. Let's get a quick take on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals extending the stay of its decision finding the Utah same-sex marriage ban unconstitutional. With the stay extended, it appears the Colorado Supreme Court is the next stop for the issue. Patty Calhoun from Westward, we've seen this issue take a lot of twists and turns, but at least right now it seems the next stop is the Colorado Supreme Court. What did you make of the announcement today?
I don't think it's a surprise. I think we will see the U.S. Supreme Court decide they do want to take it on, but that means we may not get an answer from them until next June. And in the meantime, the federal courts won't be acting on it. And Colorado will be, because Southers had taken it to the Colorado Supreme Court. They promised to take it up this fall. So we should hear on something on the Colorado decision this fall. But in the meantime, the public sentiment is certainly going their direction. No matter how the courts go, this will wind up on a ballot if the court doesn't put it on.
David Kopel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School, one of our two legal experts at the table today. Is there anything, a part of this that we're missing, or is it as basic as it sounds?
It is basic. I mean, in terms of what public sentiment is, the reliable gauge we have for that is the will of the voters of the people of Colorado who added a constitutional amendment to their our state constitution saying that marriage is one man and one woman. And courts are understandably cautious. They're cautious about striking down state statutes in general, but certainly nothing should be the cause for more caution. The most caution you ever ought to have would be on a state constitutional provision added by the people themselves. So this is very likely a case that will go to the United States Supreme Court, with federal courts all over the country having ruled that it's a violation. The same-sex marriage laws are a federal constitutional violation. It's reasonable for courts to say, okay, well, that's what we think, but the Supreme Court is going to have the final word. And before overturning the will of the voters of the people in a constitutional amendment, we ought to let the process play out.
Eric Sonderman, political analyst, a regular at this table. Is this issue off the political radar for right now? Because it seems that the public opinion is going one way really strongly, and if it's not stuck in the courts, but if there's a clear path of what we need to wait for a decision, do politicians, whether it be Republicans or Democrats, walk away from this because it's done, or is there still something to play with here?
Good question. I've been surprised to the extent it has been off the radar. It has not been a key issue. You've seen Gardner and Udall ads on everything else and pulling things out of you-know-where. We haven't talked about this one. I think the Republicans probably would like to keep it off the table going forward. It certainly bubbles up in their primaries, but there's no win for them in playing this out in November. David is somewhat right. I mean, he's certainly right in that the last time the voters of Colorado weighed in any official capacity, it was as he described, and that is now sitting in the state constitution. Public opinion, however, is not static. Now, we can't sit five of us around the table and with any credibility say how an election would come out. But I think it hasn't stopped us before. But there's a clear sense, and you look around the country, that this is an issue with unstoppable movement. The U.S. Supreme Court does need to weigh in. I would hope that would be this coming term of the U.S. Supreme Court, because you have, whether it's on a state level or obviously all these district court and circuit court of appeal decisions around the country, they're all over the map. There needs to be consistency, and that's going to be one interesting battle at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Penn Tate, our attorney from Greenberg Traurig, a longtime state lawmaker, our other legal analyst here. Wrap it up for us.
You know, I agree with much of what's been said. Clearly, the Colorado Supreme Court has indicated they're going to take it up this fall. I suspect sometime this summer or fall, what we'll see is some announcement from the U.S. Supreme Court saying they've granted certiorari. That is their review for one of these cases. There are so many of these decisions coming out of so many federal courts and so many state courts that it all premised on the question of whether their state statutes or state constitutional provisions that are in harmony with the U.S. Constitution, that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to have to act. They see what's going on. They're not oblivious to what's happening in the courts. So I think they're going to grant cert. Once that happens, I think that changes the political dynamic. I think there is something to talk about in campaigns all of a sudden because the issue takes added prominence. I could see two U.S. Senate candidates saying, who do you want to be in the Senate to confirm the next Supreme Court justices? And they'll have to decide this issue and issues like it. So I think it moves back to the forefront again. It's going to be interesting in many ways. This whole debate is kind of like years ago, the whole states' right argument around slavery. Should states be entitled to pass whatever laws they or the population wanted, regardless of whether it was in harmony with the U.S. Constitution? And clearly our history has said no. The U.S. Constitution is the primary source of and rule of law in this country, and states can act where it doesn't speak, but where it does speak, they have to be in harmony.
Mayor Hancock announced this week that he is adding 2 city council members to the executive steering committee overseeing the investigation of the sheriff's department. And on Thursday, the task forces created earlier this year to recommend changes submitted a long list of suggestions ranging from shortening deputy shifts to updating the taser policy. Patty, this has been developing every single week. Last week we were talking about how no city council members are going to be on the committee. Suddenly that changed. Now we have a list of suggestions, and there's a new report that came out just today on Friday about no charges being filed against the deputy that was on the video that punched an inmate, but not enough evidence was there to press charges, apparently, from the reports we've seen so far from the DA's office. A lot here. Take your pick.
Well, let's talk first about that report that came out from the DA's office. The task force that hasn't turned in their recommendations yet, and these task forces, remember, were established by the now ousted sheriff, but the one that did not turn in their recommendations is the one on discipline, and that is clearly a huge issue in the sheriff's department. If you cannot discipline, if you cannot fire sheriff's deputies for letting prisoners escape because you're busy surfing the net to find things on Craigslist, if you can get away with punching prisoners who are in your custody, who are just mouthing off, not beating you, there's a real problem with how we discipline. So you can see why that task force hasn't finished its work yet. Former manager of safety, Alec Abe, has said they're still working on it. The others came up with some recommendations, which are now going to go to Stephanie O'Malley, and she'll be working on that report. And then we go to the outside investigator who clearly is needed to look at what is really going on with the sheriff's department. What was fascinating is if they could have done citizens' arrests on Mayor Michael Hancock last week, City Council would have. They were hot. I have never seen City Council people as hot as they were to be basically just ignored in this very, very big city issue. And on Tuesday morning at the Mayor Council meeting, many of them were in open revolt. Now, half of them aren't running again. They're term limited. So it's easier for them to be more peeved with a strong mayor, but clearly Hancock heard them, Hancock's staff heard them, and added 2 members of City Council to the task force that's really the steering committee that's overseeing all these task forces. So they'll represent the public. I think we will get some answers, but it's going to be a long, hard fix.
David, do you think Mayor Hancock's adding of the city council members, does that fix everything? Can you tick off a city council that badly and then make everything fine a couple days later because he's a former city council member? Does that help? Or is there going to be some residual problems here?
Well, the enduring problem is Denver's structure of government, which, as Patty said, is the strong mayor model, which means you've got really one guy who runs the whole thing, and that's the only accountability is through him, and the city council is quite weak with little supervisory power. You go back to Parliament in 1400, their biggest job was not to pass new laws, but to keep an eye on the king and the king's ministers and bring them before Parliament when there was malfeasance. But the Denver City Council historically has been weak on that. It is really nice to see them for a change. For the first time I can remember actually standing up to the mayor and doing something constructive. Another problem in the sheriff's office is in Denver and Broomfield. Unlike every other county in the state, they're all in civil service, and so there's no ability to fire a deputy just because he's doing a bad job. You've got to go through this whole process, and then it finds out, well, back in 1987, a deputy punched somebody 3 times and he only got suspended with pay for 4 days. So how can you possibly fire somebody now for just punching somebody once?
Eric, there's obviously a lot of issues here, but the other thing is for me is the task forces can submit phone book size lists of recommendations, but it's going to come down to how much of those can be implemented, should be implemented, and at what rate. And if you have those under the old sheriff who is now out and probably another investigator coming in, and how does the city take its time to enact some of these recommendations?
And time is not something that the city has tons of in terms of addressing this issue, in my opinion. Patty referred to a, quote, long, hard fix. She's right. This will not be done overnight. It is a tough process because it's not just changing policies, it's changing culture and it's changing expectations. And that does not happen overnight. But because the fix might be long and hard, doesn't, to my thinking, mean the process has to be quite so long and hard as it seems to be. This process, the task force that, not the task forces that were in place under the old sheriff, but now the mayors, I don't know what we're calling it, super committee, task force, what have you. It's striking me that it is too large, it's becoming too large, it is too slow, it's looking like government. Now, there's a reason for that, it is government. But we talked, I don't know if it was last week or a couple weeks ago at this table, this was an opportunity to get it outside of government, to rise above the fray, to pull in some blue ribbon people of repute who could maybe cut through some of this stuff. And I'm not convinced that this committee that the mayor has will be able to do that. The mayor has looked unsure on this. A finer political antenna would have certainly avoided the fight at the mayor council meeting last Tuesday. Ultimately, he gave in. He had no choice but to give in. But that, you could have seen that one coming. That train was coming down the tracks. But ultimately, I am not convinced this process is moving with the speed or the urgency, the big picture that this particular problem requires. Lastly, it sure would be nice if we had a mayoral election in this town. Not that I wish any ill will politically to Michael Hancock, and in many respects he has been a good mayor. But if we had a mayoral election coming up next May, this would be an issue further articulated, kicked around, in play, and right now we don't have that.
That certainly would be nice. You're absolutely right. Penn, as a lawmaker, you've been part of these urgent situations that need attention but probably have a big super committee involved. What do you make of what's going on so far and with Mayor Hancock?
You know, there are two issues, and they're both converging. I think they're going to make the problem worse before it ever gets better. One is the political issue. I don't understand why the mayor picked this fight with city council and then capitulated. I think that's going to make the relationship tougher down the road, because now city council understands we stand on the table, we jump up and down, we holler and scream, we're going to get some movement from this guy, and they probably will. The second political issue is you got the task force that made recommendations, you got the other task force that hasn't made recommendations on discipline, and now you have the executive steering committee. You got too many groups that are going to give you so much feedback. Trying to implement it is going to be a nightmare. What's going to happen is more video is going to be exposed, sheriffs are going to mishandle the treatment of more prisoners, and the general population is just going to get really upset and even angrier than they are now, because no one's focusing on the policy issue. This is all form. The substance is, how do you deal with sheriffs from a disciplinary point of view, and how do you fix the situation where just because a person is in the custody of the sheriff because they've been convicted of an offense or they're waiting to be tried, that doesn't mean it's open season that you get to beat them, tase them, and do whatever you want to do. And so no one's dealing with that underlying policy issue, which has to be addressed right now. And that's what people are saying.
The Secretary of State's office confirmed this week the final 2 ballot initiatives that will join 2 others on the November ballot. Voters will have a chance to decide on whether foods containing GMOs should be labeled and if school board meetings involving collective bargaining should be held publicly. David, full disclosure, one of these initiatives is from the Institute, but I was actually pretty happy to hear that we have 2 propositions, which are a statutory, not messing with the Constitution at this point, joining the other 2 amendments. I'm not making judgment, but we actually have 2 propositions and 2 amendments making the final November ballot. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, and John Caldera is from Boulder, and so he's a typical health nut, and that's why we put the GMO thing on the ballot. No, so as you said, I think it's 104 for open meetings of school board collective bargaining with unions. Is an Independence Institute initiative. Obviously, we're in favor of it for the same reason, like the Durango Herald and the Pueblo Chieftain recently endorsed it, that this is huge amounts of money at stake. It's the taxpayers' money, and that's when you have it out in the open, then the taxpayers can see what's going on and better monitor the spending of their own money. It is interesting, though. I'm certainly, I will vote against the GMO thing, but because I think the anti-GMO stuff is highly unscientific, probably the most unscientific major cause that's out there that a lot of people follow. But I won't be surprised if it passes, and in some sense, for part of the same reason that I think 104 might pass, is it's about openness and transparency. You can say, well, I don't worry about GMO foods, a scientifically rational person would say, but what's wrong if people care about it so much that they have the labeling? So if they don't want to do it for whatever reason, they don't have to. And that will be a strong argument, and in a way, they're both openness and transparency type initiatives.
Eric, you certainly don't need to provide the con side to the argument. We'll get that sooner around the table. But with the 4 ballot issues, with no fracking involved, now you have 4 completely different topics, going from school boards to GMOs to personhood, and how they've worded their initiative this year, and then horse track betting that will fund education. Is the diversity of those ballot issues going to get some attention, or is there enough political oxygen left in the room?
Some of them, it's the right question, some of them will get attention, particularly the GMO one, because in Washington State, where that was on the ballot a year ago, it broke all spending records. Now, it's not going to have money like the fracking initiative would have had, but compared to all the others, it will have money. So money dictates attention. That will have advertising galore. I still think the other 3 of these, and maybe even GMOs, gets assumed, per your question, Dominic, just by the intensity of the Senate race, the congressional race, Romanoff and Kaufman, and perhaps the governor's race. We'll see how competitive that ends up being come October 1st. Sometimes I think, that David has not only an interest in the school issue through the Independence Institute, but I wonder if there's GMO sometimes in David's cup here on camera.
It's very expensive to get GMO water, I have to pay a lot for it.
Exactly. I think some of these issues are interesting. I'm very glad that the Independence Institute put the school transparency, open negotiations issue on the ballot. I'm going to be fascinated to see how that one comes out. Colorado has a rich history of whether it's pioneering sunshine laws, sunset laws, ethics in government laws, anything that smacks of openness and transparency has tended to do very well in this state. I'm going to be curious to see if the Independence Institute can get other advocates, not just newspaper editorials, but other advocates, other organizations, other prominent people to join them. Historically, John Caldera, who's a friend, and I would say this if John was sitting here, there is no one better in the state of Colorado at getting things to the starting line. John has not always been able or often been able to get them over to the finish line. I think this one has the potential to get over the finish line, but it's going to take other people around the table in addition to the Independence Institute to do that. The GMO one's going to be a fascinating fight. You got David's essentially right. You got facts and rationality and science largely on one side, not incontrovertibly, but largely you have fear on the other side, and that one's going to be an interesting fight as well.
Penn, the campaigns around all these going to be very interesting, but even the 2 amendments that have been on the ballot for a while, personhood looks a little bit different than it did before. The campaign's completely different. And the horse track betting one's coming out about, hey, do you like education and kids? Well, we already bet at horse track. So we're already seeing very different ones. Do these become litmus tests for the candidates running in all the different positions, or are they just going to be all by themselves?
I think personhood does, just because I think that's an issue that Colorado's dealt with. And even though you can put it in a different set of clothes at some point, whether it's Hickenlooper or Romanoff. Or Udall, someone's going to step out there and raise that issue. Probably Udall, just because of where Corey's been over the years on that issue is where it comes up. So I think that'll draw attention. The horse track betting, I think that won't generate a lot of attention. I'd be stunned if it doesn't go down in flames like all of the other gambling initiatives, but it's a clever shot at trying to get something passed. The two amendments we started with, the statutory changes, are interesting. I think David's right, and Eric, they speak to this trend in Colorado where we like transparency, we like openness. But at the end of the day, the hullabaloo is over the ballot questions in the election. But after the fact, it's sort of, so what? We'll have transparency, but I'll bet you not appreciably more people show up for school board meetings to hear this debate when it's time to deal with collective bargaining. And the next salvo is going to be, we want all of the superintendents' contract negotiations done in public meetings. And people will push for that. And again, a lot of people won't show up. All of the meetings at the General Assembly are open meetings. Look how empty the room is when decisions get made. Same in city council chambers around the state. The GMO is interesting. I don't fully understand it. Okay, fine, it passes, so you have another sticker on a box or on something or on the shelf in the supermarket. What I do know, based on the habits of Americans and Coloradans I've seen, is if somebody wants to buy some donuts, they're going to buy donuts. If they want to eat fruit, they're going to eat fruit. And so you can put the information out there, but if there's no commitment to having a healthy lifestyle, it doesn't matter. It's just more stuff on the box or on the shelf.
You can bring the horse organic oats. It doesn't mean it's going to eat.
There you go. Or organic water, and it doesn't mean they're going to drink.
Patty, wrap it up for us.
Well, the interesting thing about the GMO race is there's going to be plenty of money, but there's going to be nowhere to put it because all the advertising time has already been bought up. So we might soon see Colorado Inside Out brought to you by Monsanto. We're all genetically altered here at this table.
That's a good point.
So I think the horse track racing is definitely not going to get out of the gate because organized gambling that's already here is going to go against it. We all remember how much money, they poured lots of money into extending their hours a few years ago. We all see how much money has gone to community colleges from that move, almost none. And they will remind us of that probably when their competitors bringing it up. So, and as for Caldera, even a blind pig sometimes finds an acorn. It's a good plan. We like transparency, and I think that'll make it through.
John puts forth the effort. There are a lot of people in this world that don't put forth the effort, so let's give him credit for that.
We should also take credit for butchering almost every metaphor and analogy we can come up with. We have a little bit of time here, so let's go straight to our favorite time of the week, which is Disgrace of the Week, favorite part of the show. So, Patty, as always, start us off.
I'm going to say the disgrace of the week is going to be the disgrace of the season, and it is the insane, obscene amount of money that is going to go into this election and into really, really bad campaigns. I've seen some of the attack ads already, and they are only going to get worse, and they are going to be ubiquitous. We are not going to be able to walk out our door, turn on TV. Maybe we can watch Channel 12 without seeing them.
It's a political safe zone. Well, political campaign, a safe zone. David.
Al Charlatan, a professional racist, being welcomed by many people, including apparently the White House, for his participation in events in Ferguson, Missouri. This is a guy who got his national start by perpetrating a hate crime hoax in which he falsely accused law enforcement officers of raping and attacking a teenage girl. And he knew it was a hoax all along and carried it out for years, really. If anybody would have credibility to bring people together and calm them down, he's the opposite of that.
Eric.
I'll say ditto to both of them. And to Patty's point, any voter who makes up their mind based on these ads, is in somewhat a disgrace in their own way. Let me go differently. The Travis County prosecutor in Texas, I am no fan of Rick Perry. I could give you 3 reasons that he shouldn't be president, but I can only think of 2 of them right now. But that said, using indictment, using the criminal justice system to settle political scores is over the top, and shame on that.
Penn.
Well, I agree with what's been said here, except I'd take a different take on Sharpton. I was going to do Fox's The Five because of how they've handled the Ferguson, Missouri situation, but we're going to have plenty of time to talk about that. I have a new pet peeve. the NFL, and I'm a big football fan, but to think that you can tell groups like the Rolling Stones, Bruno Mars, that they have to pay to do your halftime show when they're already selling out arenas and theaters and venues around the world, they're going to pay to do your show. They're selling out football stadiums, and they don't need a game to distract people for an hour of time.
I would second that. And to Eric's point, if folks are looking for information about the ballot, Colorado Decides starts its epic run with big debates co-hosted by my friend Eric and I every Friday at 7 o'clock starting September 12th. So you don't need to trust those 30-second ads. You can come trust me and Eric. Say something nice about somebody. Patty, start us off.
The Colorado State Fair starts today. If you want to go see Little Liz, the world's smallest woman who wasn't allowed in Boulder, you can go down to Pueblo and do that. But more to the point, some of the great programs that go on, like the Colorado Centennial Farm Program. The first farmer who's farmed, he's 100 years old today and is getting his first award down there, Rocky Ford Farmer, and all the other farms in Colorado that have hit 100. It's a great program.
David.
Jim Kerrigan, who passed away a few days ago, one of the greatest attorneys in the history of the state of Colorado, a great lawyer for the little guy, and then a justice of the Colorado Supreme Court, and then a United States federal district judge. As admirable as a man can be in the legal profession.
Eric.
I'm glad David mentioned Jim Kerrigan. Let me go international and mention James Foley, the journalist. In journalism for all the right reasons, we need more people like him, executed in the most barbaric fashion imaginable, says something about who he was, who his family is, and blessings to them, and also the battle we're up against.
Ken.
David took mine. Having grown up in Boulder, I've known Judge Kerrigan since I was a young boy and went to school with two of his kids. So major loss for the state and someone who really did some marvelous things for us. But also final pitch to the state fair. Patty's right. Folks attend because, there have been times when there was a question about whether Colorado would continue to have a state fair. And attendance is what drives the issue. So we need people to show up.
I'll throw my own, say something nice. It's my wife's annual anniversary of her 29th birthday, so hope she's enjoying that. That's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. For our viewers watching our live stream on our website right now, stay tuned for a special behind-the-scenes segment. And for our viewers, our broadcast, we'll see you next week. And don't forget to check out our web-exclusive CIO postgame at cpt12.org every Friday afternoon. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching. Good night.
Hello, I'm Steven, and I'll be directing Colorado Inside Out today. I'm not a director, but I play one on TV. The main thing I'll be doing is watching these monitors up here and trying to determine when to go to the talent who will be talking. I'll be working mostly with Tyler, which is our technical director, so he's the one who's pushing all the buttons. He's a big button pusher.
Hello, my name is Tyler. I'm the technical director here. It's called a switcher. I basically listen to the director and take the camera cuts as the director calls it.
Ready, camera 2, take.
So each button here corresponds with a camera out in the studio. Camera 1, camera 2, camera 3, camera 4. For CIO, we use 4 cameras. This bottom row is for preview, so before taking a cut, we pull it up in preview. The preview monitor is to the left there. And as soon as we want to take it into program, which is what's actually going to tape what's being recorded, the director will say, all right, take camera 1. I also wait for the director's cue to bring in IDs, sort of the lower third, tells who the guest is. Also, loading clips, roll-ins, which includes the open, and it all changes show to show, so, which is fun. So I basically I take orders from the director, as we all do, and we really enjoy it.
Hello? Is this working? Everyone else is doing their own job and contributing, and the director just kind of is the focal point.
Mic cue in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fade mic cue.
The director's main job is just to kind of funnel all that and bring it all together.
Roll credits. Expect down. Set black and dissolve. Audio out.